Before we begin, if you enjoy slow, atmospheric history like this, consider liking the video and subscribing. It genuinely helps the channel grow and motivates me to keep creating. I'd also love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to share suggestions or even future video requests in the comments. Now let's begin. 1162, on the endless steppes of Mongolia, a child was born clutching a blood clot in his fist. The shamans saw this as an omen. This child would spill oceans of blood. They named him Temüjin. The world would come to know him as Genghis Khan, the man who would build the largest contiguous land empire in human history. When Temüjin was 9 years old, his father Yasuji was poisoned by rival Tatars. Within days, the Temüjin clan abandoned Temüjin, his mother Holan, and his siblings on the frozen steppe to die. This was where most stories would end. A widow and her children, cast out, facing the Mongolian winter with nothing. But Holan refused to accept death. They dug for roots in frozen ground. They fished with bent needles. They hunted marmots and mice. They ate anything they could find. It was starvation stretched over years, but they survived. Young Temüjin learned the only lesson that mattered. Power was the only truth. Noble birth meant nothing without strength. Loyalty was conditional. The world was not fair, and justice was something you had to take for yourself. As a teenager, the Temüjin clan captured him and locked him in a kang, a heavy wooden collar. They paraded him as a slave, a broken thing. But during a celebration when his captors were drunk, Temüjin struck one guard with the kang itself, smashing his skull with his own prison. He fled and dove into a freezing river, staying submerged for hours while search parties passed overhead. He refused to die. This crystallized everything. Violence, applied with precision at the right moment, could overcome any disadvantage. Boldness was survival. Hesitation was death. At 16, Temüjin married Borte from the Conqueror tribe. Soon after, the Merkid tribe raided and kidnapped her as revenge for an old grudge. Temüjin had no army, no power, nothing. But he went to Togrul of the Kare tribe and to Jamuka, his blood brother, and through sheer force of personality convinced them to help. He assembled 20,000 warriors and fell upon the Merkid like thunder, reclaiming his wife and destroying their camp. This was his first military victory. It revealed the pattern that would define his life. He was not the strongest warrior or from the most powerful family, but he understood that power is taken, not given. Loyalty comes from results and rewards, not tradition or blood. Over 15 years, Temüjin did the impossible. He unified the Mongol tribes. The steppes were home to dozens of tribes who had warred for centuries. The idea of Mongolian unity was fantasy. Temüjin made it reality. He destroyed the old system completely. He promoted men based purely on ability and loyalty. A shepherd could command thousands. A nobleman who showed cowardice would be executed. He organized his forces into units of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000 with perfect clarity of command. He built an intelligence network that gathered information on every enemy. He mastered psychological warfare, spreading stories of Mongol invincibility. He was utterly ruthless to enemies and utterly generous to followers. One by one, the tribes fell. He defeated the Tatars who poisoned his father, exterminating every male taller than a wagon axle. He destroyed the Merkids. He conquered the Naimans and Karates. He even defeated Jamuka, his blood brother turned rival. By 1206, every Mongol tribe was united. At a great Kurultai on the Onan River, Temüjin was proclaimed Genghis Khan, supreme leader of all Mongols. He was 44 years old. The Mongols were one people, one army, one unstoppable force. For any other man, this would have been enough. The Mongol army was not just a military force. It was a perfected instrument of conquest, the most lethal fighting machine the medieval world had ever seen. Every Mongol warrior was a cavalryman from birth. They learned to ride before they could walk. Each warrior had 3 to 5 horses, rotating between mounts to cover 100 miles in a day for weeks on end. They survived on mares' milk and blood drained from living horses. They could campaign where other armies would starve. The Mongol composite bow could launch arrows over 300 yards with enough force to pierce armor. A skilled archer could loose 6 arrows in 10 seconds while riding at full gallop with deadly accuracy. Every warrior carried 2 bows, 120 arrows, a lasso, dagger, sword, and lance. Light armor provided protection without sacrificing mobility. But the genius was not individual skill. It was coordination and tactics. The Mongols perfected the feigned retreat. They would engage an enemy, shoot arrows, then suddenly flee. European knights, Chinese generals, Persian cavalry all saw this as cowardice and pursued eagerly. Once the enemy was scattered and exhausted, fresh Mongol units appeared from flanks and rear. The hunter became the hunted. The enemy was surrounded and annihilated. This tactic worked because it exploited pride and honor. The Mongols had no such weaknesses. They cared only for victory. Their mobility allowed them to coordinate multiple armies across hundreds of miles, attacking from all directions simultaneously. By the time enemies realized they were surrounded, it was too late. For sieges, Genghis Khan recruited Chinese and Persian engineers. They built trebuchets that hurled stones over walls. They dug tunnels to collapse fortifications. They diverted rivers to flood cities or cut off water. They used human shields, forcing prisoners to march at the front of assaults. They catapulted plague corpses over walls. Cities that had held for years fell to Mongols in weeks. The most powerful weapon was psychological. Genghis Khan offered every city a choice. Surrender immediately and be spared. Resist and be annihilated. Every person killed. Every building burned. Ruins sown with salt. This was not a bluff. When cities resisted, the Mongols carried out systematic executions. Each soldier assigned a quota, 20, 30 people to kill. The slaughter continued until cities were empty. Stories spread faster than armies. Soon cities surrendered at the sight of Mongol scouts rather than face destruction. The reputation of invincibility became self-fulfilling. Armies broke and ran at Mongol banners. Kings sent tribute before the Mongols even arrived. Genghis Khan had weaponized fear itself. Before attacking, Genghis Khan already knew everything about his target. Mongol spies spent years gathering intelligence. They knew which gates were weakest, which officials might be bribed, where water sources were. They had maps and detail plans. The enemy knew almost nothing except rumors. This information asymmetry was devastating. Genghis Khan also created the Yasa, a legal code applied equally to everyone. Theft, adultery, and desertion meant death. But the laws were clear and consistent. Most revolutionary was absolute religious tolerance. Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, and shamanists coexisted under protection of law. This was pragmatic. Religious conflict would tear the empire apart, so he eliminated it through enforced tolerance. With Mongolia unified, Genghis Khan turned to China. The Jin dynasty in the north had tens of millions of subjects, armies of hundreds of thousands, and cities protected by massive walls. On paper, Mongol nomads conquering China was absurd. The campaign began in 1209 against Western Xia as a testing ground. The Mongols besieged cities, devastated the countryside, and forced submission. More importantly, Genghis Khan learned. He studied fortifications. He recruited Chinese engineers. He mastered siege warfare. In 1211, he invaded the Jin dynasty with perhaps 100,000 warriors. The Jin had reinforced the Great Wall and stationed massive armies. The Mongols went through them like a knife through silk. They found weak points, struck multiple locations simultaneously, and poured into northern China within months. At the Battle of Yihuling, a Jin army of several hundred thousand met the Mongols in a mountain pass. The Mongols outflanked them, turned the mountains into traps, and annihilated the entire force. With field armies destroyed, Genghis Khan ravaged northern China systematically. The Mongols burned farms, destroyed irrigation systems, and drove rural populations into cities. This destroyed the agricultural base, created famine, and swelled cities beyond capacity. Then they besieged these overcrowded death traps one by one. The Jin capital Zhongdu, modern Beijing, was home to 1 million people behind 40-foot walls. The siege lasted over a year. Mongols surrounded the city, cutting all supplies. They built enormous trebuchets. They dug mines. They launched flaming projectiles. Inside, starvation set in. Then plague. Hundreds of thousands died. In 1215, Zhongdu fell. The Mongols looted for a month, taking everything of value. Then they burned the rest. The fires burned for over a month. Smoke visible for 100 miles. One of the world's greatest cities reduced to ash. The demographic impact was catastrophic. The Jin dynasty population of 50 million collapsed to 9 million. 40 million people gone. An 80% decline. Cities of hundreds of thousands became towns of thousands. Agricultural regions returned to wilderness. This was not just battle. This was systematic destruction. Millions died in massacres. Millions more starved as agricultural systems were destroyed. Disease ravaged overcrowded cities. Genghis Khan had not simply conquered northern China. He had nearly destroyed it as a functioning society. This was calculated. The Jin had refused to submit. They fought tooth and nail. So they paid the ultimate price. Other kingdoms, watching, learned the lesson. When Mongols came, surrender was better than resistance. By 1218, Genghis Khan was in his mid-50s. He had unified Mongolia. He was conquering China. His empire stretched from the Pacific to Central Asia. He was considering retirement. Then, the Khwarezmian Empire made a catastrophic mistake. The Khwarezmian Empire controlled Central Asia, Persia, and parts of Middle East under Shah Allah ad-Din Muhammad. It was wealthy and powerful. Genghis Khan sent a trade caravan of 500 merchants with a letter proposing peaceful trade. This was partnership between equals. When the caravan reached Otrar, the governor accused them of being spies. With the Shah's approval, he executed all 500 merchants and seized their goods. When news reached Genghis Khan, he sent 3 ambassadors demanding justice. The Shah executed 1 ambassador and shaved the beards of the other 2 before sending them back. In Mongol culture, this was unforgivable insult. The Shah had just declared war on the most dangerous man alive. He had no idea what he had done. Genghis Khan assembled an army of 100 to 200,000 warriors and personally took command. This was not a raid. This was annihilation. The Shah commanded 400,000 men, had vast wealth, and strongly fortified cities. None of it mattered. The Mongols did what the Shah's advisors said was impossible. They crossed impassable mountains and deserts with their entire army. They moved faster than news of their approach. The first many cities knew of invasion was when Mongol scouts appeared on the horizon. Genghis Khan divided his forces and struck multiple targets simultaneously across hundreds of miles with perfect timing. Khwarezmian forces scattered across the empire could not concentrate before it was too late. Otrar, where the merchants died, was besieged first. Genghis Khan wanted to send a message. After 5 months, it fell. The governor who started this catastrophe was brought before the Khan. Molten silver was poured into his eyes and ears until he died. The execution was brutal, theatrical, meant to be remembered. Then came systematic destruction on a scale the world had never witnessed. Bokhara, one of the greatest centers of Islamic learning, was stormed. Genghis Khan rode his horse into the great mosque and declared he was the flail of God, sent to punish them for their sins. The city was looted. Men were killed or pressed into service. Women and children enslaved. Famous libraries burned. Samarkand, perhaps the most beautiful city in Central Asia, held out only days before surrendering. The Mongols executed soldiers and the wealthy but spared craftsmen. Still, tens of thousands died. The jewel of architecture was left a shadow. Nishapur resisted fiercely. During the siege, one of Genghis Khan's sons-in-law was killed by an arrow. This sealed the city's fate. When Nishapur fell, Genghis Khan ordered total extermination. Every living thing killed. Men, women, children, animals. Everything. Then they cut off heads and built pyramids of skulls. One for men, one for women, one for children. The pyramids stood for years as warning. The worst fate was reserved for Urgench. This city resisted for months with incredible determination, fighting street by street, building by building. When it finally fell, the massacre was beyond comprehension. Every person killed, over 1 million dead. After the slaughter, the Mongols diverted the river through the city so it could never be rebuilt. Urgench was not conquered. It was erased. The Shah fled before the Mongol advance, abandoning everything. Genghis Khan sent his best generals with 20,000 men to hunt him across thousands of miles. The Shah died on an island in the Caspian Sea, broken and defeated. His empire in ruins. His son fought on with skill, but was ultimately driven into exile. The Khwarezmian Empire ceased to exist. The invasion killed between 1 and 15 million people. Entire regions were depopulated. Cities that thrived for centuries were ruins. Sophisticated irrigation systems destroyed, turning fertile land to desert. The Silk Road disrupted for decades, all because a governor killed some merchants. Because the Shah was too proud to apologize. Genghis Khan sent a message that echoed across the medieval world. Attack the Mongols, insult the Khan, and your civilization will be wiped from the earth. The message was received. Rulers everywhere heard the stories and felt cold fear. They sent embassies, tribute, desperate hopes to avoid the Khwarezmian fate. After destroying Khwarezm, Genghis Khan's attention returned east. The Western Xia kingdom had failed to provide troops when requested. This was betrayal. In 1226, at age 64, Genghis Khan personally led a campaign of total extermination. City after city fell. Population slaughtered. Western Xia would not just be defeated. It would be erased. During this campaign, in 1227, Genghis Khan fell ill. Some say he fell from his horse. Others suggest disease. As his condition worsened, he summoned his sons and gave final instructions. The campaign must continue until Western Xia was completely destroyed. The conquest of the world must continue. He also gave very specific orders about his death. It must be kept absolutely secret. No one outside his inner circle could know. If news spread, rebellions would erupt. The empire might collapse. Genghis Khan died in August 1227 at approximately 65 years old. His death was kept secret for months. When the Western Xia capital finally surrendered, the Mongols carried out his last order. Every member of the royal family executed. The population massacred. The kingdom ceased to exist. The funeral procession was carried out in absolute secrecy. According to legend, everyone who encountered it was killed. Shepherds, travelers, entire villages, all executed to ensure the burial location remained unknown. When they reached the site near sacred Burkhan, Khaldun Mountain, he was laid to rest with treasures. Then the location was hidden with meticulous care. The grave filled and trampled by thousands of horses. Trees planted, rivers possibly diverted. Everyone who knew the location was killed. Today, 800 years later, despite modern technology, no one has found Genghis Khan's tomb. He conquered the world, but his final resting place remains one of history's greatest mysteries. The scale of achievement is staggering. In 25 years from 1206 to 1227, he built an empire stretching from the Pacific to Eastern Europe. Over 9 million square miles, 100 million people, a quarter of the world's population under Mongol rule. The death toll was catastrophic. 40 million people died, 11% of the world's entire population. World War I killed similar numbers with machine guns and poison gas. The Mongols achieved it with horses, bows, and swords. The demographic impact was so severe it affected global carbon levels. Mass death led to forest regrowth across vast farmland, absorbing enough carbon to create measurable impact in ice core samples. The Mongol conquests literally changed Earth's climate. Genghis Khan's genetic legacy is equally staggering. A 2003 study found 16 million men alive today carry a Y chromosome lineage originating from Mongolia around his time. Roughly 1 in 200 men is a direct patrilineal descendant of Genghis Khan. His DNA lives on across Asia, the Middle East, and Eastern Europe. The Mongol Empire fundamentally reshaped Eurasia. Modern borders were largely drawn by Mongol conquests. Russia's expansion, China's current borders, the political geography of Central Asia all reflect Mongol impact. The Mongol peace created the first truly global economy. For the first time, goods and ideas flowed freely from China to Europe. Paper money, gunpowder, the compass, printing, countless innovations traveled the Silk Road under Mongol protection. This exchange accelerated human progress and contributed to the European Renaissance and scientific revolution. But the empire also spread devastation on unimaginable scale. The destruction of Baghdad ended the Islamic Golden Age. The invasion of Russia shaped centuries of history. The depopulation of Central Asia created ecological changes persisting today. Genghis Khan embodies history's great paradox. He caused death and destruction few have matched. He ordered massacres. He burned cities. He destroyed civilizations. Yet he also created peace and prosperity for millions. Under Mongol rule, trade flourished. Religious tolerance was practiced. Meritocracy replaced aristocracy. Law was applied equally. He rose from nothing to become the most powerful man on earth through will, intelligence, and ruthlessness. He took scattered nomadic tribes and forged them into a world power. He implemented innovations centuries ahead of their time. As a military commander, his tactics are studied today in military academies. The feigned retreat, strategic envelopment, psychological warfare, integration of intelligence gathering, organizational innovations, all became templates for future armies. He achieved this starting from nothing, with no formal education, learning everything through experience and genius. As a state builder, his legal code brought order to chaos. His postal system connected vast territories. Religious tolerance prevented wars from tearing the empire apart. Meritocracy created capable government. These were foundations of functional administration on unprecedented scale. Who was Genghis Khan as a person? He was capable of great loyalty and great brutality. He rewarded service with generosity. He destroyed opposition with ruthlessness. He loved his wife despite uncertainty about his sons. He maintained childhood friendships. He was practical and unsentimental. When his blood brother became his rival, he fought without hesitation. He had crude humor and rough manners even as supreme ruler. He was intensely focused on legacy. He wanted his empire to last. He wanted his name to echo through history. He achieved this beyond anything he imagined. How do we measure his impact? By territory conquered? By people ruled? By changes to history? By any measure, he stands at the pinnacle of human achievement in conquest and power. He ruled the largest contiguous empire ever created. No other individual has had such direct, measurable impact on so many human lives. Alexander died young with his empire fragmenting. Caesar ruled only a fraction of Genghis Khan's territory. Napoleon was ultimately defeated and exiled. Genghis Khan conquered half the known world and died in power with his empire intact and growing. Modern judgments of Genghis Khan often say more about the person judging than the man himself. To Western sensibilities shaped by human rights concepts, his actions seem monstrous. To many in Mongolia and Central Asia, he is a hero who unified peoples and created great civilization. The truth is Genghis Khan existed in a brutal age where might made right, where survival depended on being more ruthless than enemies. He mastered those rules with unprecedented success. In modern Mongolia, he is a national hero. His image appears on currency and buildings. The main international airport bears his name. A massive equestrian statue stands outside Ulaanbaatar as national pride symbol. For Mongolians, he represents when their small nation was the center of the world, when Mongol power was supreme, when they commanded respect and fear from all nations. Over centuries, Genghis Khan became more myth than man. In Europe, he was the scourge of God. In Islamic tradition, divine punishment for sins. In Chinese sources, a capable barbarian eventually civilized. In Mongol tradition, the father of the nation, unifier, great lawgiver. The real man is difficult to see through these interpretations, but certain traits remain consistent. Intelligence, ruthlessness, charisma, ambition, unwavering commitment to goals. No honest assessment can ignore the cost. 40 million dead, civilizations destroyed, libraries burned, cities erased. The suffering was immense and real. Each number represents a person who died in terror, families watching children killed, scholars watching life's work burned. The massacres, human shields, deliberate terror, these caused trauma echoing through generations. Genghis Khan knew what he was doing. He chose it anyway because it served his purposes. From a moral standpoint, this is difficult to justify no matter how impressive the achievements. Yet if we value peace, prosperity, and cultural exchange, the Pax Mongolica was a net positive despite terrible cost. If we value human life and dignity, the massacres condemn him regardless of outcomes. If we value achievement, his rise from orphan to ruler represents human potential at its peak. If we value mercy, his treatment of enemies reveals him as monster. The reality is Genghis Khan was complex, operating at a scale that magnified every decision to world historical proportions. His strengths and flaws both shaped human civilization. Perhaps the most accurate statement is this: Genghis Khan changed the world more than almost any individual who has ever lived. Whether that change was ultimately good or bad is a question each person must answer for themselves. In the end, his story is about power in its purest form. He had nothing and took everything. He was born to die on the steppe and instead conquered the world. He transformed from Temüjin the orphan into Genghis Khan the supreme ruler through sheer will, intelligence, and absolute refusal to accept limitations. He proved one person, given sufficient drive and ability, could change the entire world. He proved old orders, old hierarchies, old certainties could be swept away by someone who understood power and was willing to do whatever was necessary to obtain it. This is why his story still fascinates 800 years later, why historians study him, why military commanders analyze his campaigns, why his name is known worldwide. Genghis Khan achieved immortality not through monuments or tombs, but through impact. He bent history itself to his will. He changed the course of human civilization. He proved one person could matter on a global scale. From birth clutching a blood clot to death as master of a known world. From abandoned orphan to eternal emperor. From Temüjin to Genghis Khan. That is the story of the most successful conqueror in human history. That is the legacy of the man who conquered the world. And that legacy, for better or worse, will endure as long as human civilization remembers its past.